We are fortunate enough to have a conversation with attorney Edgar Belaval of Belaval Law here in Miami, Florida. In this episode of Thriving in Construction, the podcast, attorney Belaval will share his extensive trial experience in construction, real estate, contract, commercial, and liability cases starting from its inception to trial throughout Florida courts, as well as the U.S. District Courts of the Southern and Middle Districts of Florida. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming attorney Edgar Belaval. Welcome to our show here in Thriving in Construction, the podcast. Edgar, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm so excited that we're going to talk about with an attorney in construction because we know this industry, it's very, 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 very hard to be successful without engaging with an attorney. Not only for risk management, but also, risk prevention, but also to manage risk that shows up whenever we don't know. So this industry, especially in this country, in my opinion, it's a need to engage with an attorney. And obviously you want the best attorney, you want somebody that is a partner, somebody that has your best interests at heart. So I'm very delighted and grateful that you're here to share your expertise.
Thank you.
So can you introduce yourself, your a little bit of your story, your background in this field?
Sure. My name is Edgar Belaval. I started out in the year 2000 as an attorney in the state of Florida. Primarily started working in the Florida Keys. Gave me an opportunity to go to trial almost immediately. Usually attorneys will sit in a back room for years before they get the opportunity to go to trial. I was fortunate enough to be able to have that opportunity to go to trial right from the beginning of my career. And it gave me a lot of insight into the very people that I represented. Because the Florida Keys was a smaller area, I was able to actually meet with the clients, learn about their business, go to their offices and see how they work and what their methods are. And that just gave me a unique perspective, which I still bring to this day. I still like to meet with my clients in their offices and meet who they work with so that I can know what they're all about.
But let's be honest. You like the Keys because it's also fishing.
Keys was very nice because of that, but it also has its limits, which one of the limits is the number of clients. It's a limited area in terms of construction. There's a lot of restrictions. Therefore, once a construction project starts, you lose the client for years on end until something else comes along.
You lose the client, but in a way, could be a good thing that they're not calling you. That means they're doing well.
It is an excellent thing. Usually that means that their contract was well negotiated. It means that the parties did on both sides what they were supposed to do. And it means that all the subcontractors, laborers, everybody involved in the project, in the office, everywhere else worked to make it a success.
That's ideal, right? That we engage an attorney at the beginning of the process, not towards the end, because there's a lot of things that were supposed to be done and they weren't done the right way to a degree, right?
And that's the most important thing, that everyone in this industry, whether you're a laborer, whether you're an architect, contractor, or even an owner of a property, the most important thing is to get a good contract that's well negotiated, that all the terms are out there, and more importantly, that both parties, all parties to the contract, understand their rights and their remedies. And if they know that from the beginning, there's very few disputes, there's very few issues. Like everything else, there'll be issues that come up, but they can be talked out.
So, we have different perspectives of what attorney is. I mean, I myself have a little bit of a pain around that process, and I could be stereotypical about the word attorney, which I don't want to do because I also know it happens as a general contractor, which I am. And stereotypes do not have all the information. We exclude instead of include, we don't connect. And so if you're here from a positive perspective, from the perspective of adding value, if you were to say to our listeners, there's three things of the entire construction process where an attorney can be instrumental
to save you money, to save you headaches, to save you from stress, anxiety, losing your company. Which are the three components from the entire construction process? If you had to divide it in three chunks, what would they be?
Well, I think just like the construction project, there's the pre-construction, which is the contract portion, where you're developing the contract and you're discussing with the other party to the contract, whether it's a property owner or a subcontractor or even an employee, so that everybody knows what's going on and everybody has an idea of where the project will be in the specified period of time, whether it's 1 year, 6 months, or 5 years. All projects have a schedule. The next most important thing is being organized from the beginning. When I say organized, I mean keep projects separate, keep project documents separate. If you can, segregate your emails from other projects, each project having their own set of emails, whether they're in a file or a folder of some sort, so that if issues come up, it's much easier and much quicker to respond by finding those emails. Almost everything in construction now works through the digital and electronic format of email and or text. So it's very important to set up a system for that. The most important thing is try and stay away from text, because texts, phones get lost, service providers change, where emails, they're out there and they can be saved for eternity. Whether you change your servers, anything else, somebody has a copy of it out there. And so it's important to have all of that information from the beginning. The second component, I would say, is once you start working, that you continue. You don't have to abandon your lawyer. Your lawyer should be a partner in the construction project with you. The lawyer should be advising you anytime you have a hiccup, whether it's, I don't know if they're changing the schedule, if it's a change order, if it's a material change. And if you go to your attorney will go to the contract and be able to determine whether or not that's addressed in the contract and how to deal with it. It's much better to spend a couple $100 with your attorney, who probably won't charge you for the most part for advising you as you go along, rather than having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation later. And then the final third step, I would say, and again, this is in projects that go positive, is you work with your attorney to close out the project. You want to make sure all the releases are done from every single party. You want to make sure that payments have been made, and you want to make sure that if there were any changes, that those were accounted for all the way through. And of course, that's where the attorney comes in to help you finalize those things in kind of a checklist.
In a project that goes relatively well.
Correct.
What has been the most horrible project you have participated in, and why? Not why have you participated, but what has been the biggest screw up you have seen that could have been prevented? So now I want you to tell us the perspective of when things go wrong, what really got effed up? So
I would say, from the most part, it's been in multiple cases. I don't have any one that's worse than any all the rest, but it always comes down to communication, and the lack of communication, whether it's between a superintendent and his employer, the contractor, whether it's between a contractor and a subcontractor, there's some sort of disconnect where one party didn't communicate to the other party. And usually these things happen where you have pay applications that use one of the computer programs that a lot of the big contractors, the big corporations like to use, where those systems aren't set up for all of the eventualities. There's some sort of slight change, okay, but their pay system won't allow for it. And then there's a lack of communication because the parties talk on the phone, but there's nothing to prove it. So again, email is very, very important. You send an email to somebody and you say, please tell me that what I'm going to do, this work that I'm going to complete, is approved and who it's approved by. And then that person comes back, and if they don't respond, then you don't work. You can't do any further work because of a lack of communication. And you tell them that that's important, that communication. You tell them, I still haven't heard from you. I need to.
Right. Edgar, you know that, I mean, you hit it on the head. I think everything in life that goes wrong is communication. It's not only in construction. And so you know that I'm sure you've been in litigations where you know the attorney that is representing the other party, it's uncomfortable confronting, or it's uncomfortable communicating, something that could be uncomfortable for the other person or even the attorney himself. I tell our project managers and even our staff in general, and even in relationships, some people are very uncomfortable. It's just a personality thing, communicating something that could potentially be a disruption to the other person. Maybe not. We make a story in our heads, and because of that, we prevent ourselves from communicating what we really want to say. And I know you don't have a problem in that department. Neither do I. Now, I used to communicate in a more aggressive way when I started my career. I thought that was the way to go. And I had not done a lot of work on myself. I used to be called the dragon lady. But I used to communicate and document. Some people are uncomfortable with that. What's the advice? What would you tell somebody? How to communicate? The worst thing, it shouldn't be difficult, but for some people, it's just detrimental.
So I think the most important thing about communication is making somebody feel comfortable that it's not going to affect the rest of their lives. Just telling me something doesn't mean this ends your career, it ends your life. It could get worse everywhere, whether it's in government. We saw it back during Watergate in the 70s with President Nixon. The cover-up is worse than the actual crime. So if something goes wrong on a project, you're better off telling somebody, getting yelled at, dealing with it, the adversity of it, maybe even losing your job, but covering it up, that could affect you for life because now you're going to be blackballed. You not only lost your job, but now people are going to have that stigma carried around forever that they covered it up, that they hid from. So I think the most important thing is to make your employee feel comfortable. One, that this isn't the end of the world. I need communication with you because it's normal and things are going to come up and negative things are going to come up. But it's not going to be the end of your life if you tell me now. And we tell that to our kids from the beginning, tell me now. It's only going to get worse later if I find out the truth. And nothing is different in construction. Foremen and superintendents will refuse to tell you certain things that they don't find important. But if you set up a system, and I again advise everybody to do this, set up a weekly communication system where everybody just talks. And it could be one-on-one with your superintendent or your foreman, or it could be in a group of all superintendents and foremen on all your projects. The whole idea is that everybody discusses and everybody puts out in the open so they feel comfortable. My telling you this situation, somebody else may have the exact situation and already have resolved it. Don't reinvent the wheel. And that's one of the problems with not communicating is everybody tries to find a solution and you're wasting time finding a solution when everybody should be able to help each other based on experience.
Absolutely. And sometimes, now let me go to the construction contract. This is I don't know why, but it's pretty typical from my 33 years of experience. People general contractors tend to do change order work without following the protocol outlined in the contract. The contract basically says, in general, I have never seen a contract that says, go ahead and do all the change order work that you didn't price and do it, and I'm going to pay you later. I don't think I've seen that contract. Have you?
Never.
So the contract says you cannot. First of all, it says when you are aware of a change that could cost time or money, you're supposed to tell me within X number of days. As soon as your understanding of the delay or the change, you're clear on it. You got to tell me, and then you have to price it, and then I have to approve it, and then I can tell you go ahead and do it. But it doesn't happen, and it doesn't matter the size of the company. I think this is probably the biggest curse out there for everyone, because at the end, owner representatives manage to communicate to the staff that go ahead, do it, I'm going to approve it on a verbal. And, you go through millions of dollars of change order work. And sometimes owners of companies don't know about it. This is happening, these transactions are happening, and one person is convincing the other, the GC representative, the owner convinces the GC thinks, I'm doing a good job for the owner, I want to please the client, and then I convince the subcontractor just want to get the hell out of here, they just want to finish, and before you know it, there's a ton of people involved, a lot of liability, and nothing is for sure. Nobody has granted or assured us that the work is going to be paid. Now, we're here in this situation. Why is it that people cannot tell the client, look, I would love to do this work. Help me understand your contract. It says this. Please tell me, how do I act differently? I mean, I see that as a simple conversation. But don't you feel the same way I do?
I see it every single day with my clients, and it's one of the toughest things because what it is it's human nature, and it happens even in law, in litigation. I tell everyone, listen, you're going to have a question presented to you, and you have to present an answer. This is on the law side in a deposition. At some point, the question and answers will come very easily and very smoothly. You're going to get lulled, meaning you're going to get confused or dragged into thinking it's just a conversation. But it's not. Every question, every word that you answer is important. You need to listen to the question in its entirety. But it's inevitable. People get lulled into it. The exact same thing happens in construction. People are working on a project. They befriend after a couple weeks. They become friends with the owner's representative, with the owner. And they believe that they are friends. And they forget that in a contract and in a relationship, if it's in writing, you need to follow that writing because it's there for a reason. So somebody will agree to do additional work and they say, well, but this guy's going to give me more work down the road, or he's going to give my company more work down the road. That is never, ever the way to do business. You're on a current project. You finish that project. You close out that project. You move on to the next project. You can't sit and think about your future relationship. The best way to merit or to bring loyalty between a contractor and an owner on future projects is to do your job and do it well. Nobody's going to get upset with you for not completing a change order on the spot without approval because they themselves wouldn't do that. So why should you? The most difficult part is to convince a superintendent, a foreman, or anyone else in a position of authority that they shouldn't start that work until they see a signed and approved document and until the office, the front office, has approved it. And this is the same whether you're a two-person, two-man job or you're a huge corporation. You should not do the work until you have it in writing because, and again, signed and in writing by a person that's approved to do it. Because on some of these projects, you have all kinds of people that have names like project manager, assistant project manager, but they don't necessarily have the authority. And that'll be a source of litigation down the road if they didn't have authority. So the best way to do it is to go to the point person. There should be a person in the contract that's the person that you go to for these things, and that person should have to sign. Whether they're out of town, out of the country, whatever, the change order needs to be signed by the person with authority.
Absolutely. And it's not only the implication of the financial implications of will I ever get paid, the amount that it costs me or what I'm expecting, because maybe they'll pay you what they think they should. Once the service is rendered, there's a story about, when you render a service and you already have the benefit of it, you're not that interested.
So there's a great saying in Spanish, músico pago no toca bien. A paid musician doesn't play as well. The musician's going to play his best, thinking, I'm going to get a tip afterwards, I'm going to get more money. But if you're already paid, you're going to do the bare minimum. Similar situation.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. But then the other part, which is one of the biggest risks construction has, is cash flow. So no client, especially if you're doing government work, will ever pay any change order work that is not processed officially and signed by 100 people and put in their system. They will never do that. It doesn't matter who approves. God can come and approve the change order and they won't pay. And so when we do the change order work, the subcontractor, the trade partner is starting to ask for their money and you don't have the funds to liquidate that debt.
Correct. And so one of the ways that I explain to employees on construction jobs, forepersons, superintendents, as well as subcontractors, that any additional work that you do that you're not paid for is going to affect cash flow, which means you aren't getting paid. Whether you're an employee that's expecting that salary, what if you didn't get paid that salary? Well, I was expecting it on such and such date. Well, guess what? I don't get paid. So how am I supposed to pay you? And that's why you can't allow them to go off and do things without everything being in writing. And again, it's easier to say it here when we're not on an actual project, but if you set up checklists and do the same thing on every project, it becomes habit and it really does avoid future issues.
I'm going to take all those tips that you are giving and I'm going to put you on the spot because I want to create some follow-up conversations and trainings just so that we can do preventive. So I'm going to ask you if you would be willing to do this with me so we can serve our community of trade partners and people. Everyone wants to do a good job.
I will gladly do that. And I tell you this, I was going to mention earlier, in communication. One of the other areas of communication is between your attorney. Contractors have a tendency to say, they don't need to know about that. Something that happened on the job, it was minor and it could affect my case in a negative way. Well, that's exactly what you want your attorney to know, because your attorney has ways of figuring out how to resolve that situation, whether it's through an explanation, whether there's a law, a statute, or somewhere in the contract that addresses it. But if you aren't fully foretelling them every bit of detail and actually divulging every detail about the case, no matter how minor, negative, positive, you need to tell your attorney. And that communication, again, goes both ways. Your attorney also needs to communicate with you anywhere where there's a negative situation in a case so that you can address it from both sides. So the same thing with my helping you out with this and providing additional and future assistance. I want to help people because I want them to come back organized, clean. It will make cases for everybody, whether it's my law firm or any law firm out there that will be able to do a better job by having the documents and the tools.
I believe that if a firm is engaged with a consultant, an attorney in this case, and they go out of business, even though they have been working with an attorney for years, it's a failure of the company, but it's a failure of that attorney also. Because at the end of the day, I think you want your companies to grow, not to go out of business because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. I mean, you want to have the right partner, and I'm a firm believer of that. So I'm very grateful that you're here. And let's change a little bit. Let's talk about diversity and inclusion. And you've been in this industry for how long?
20 years.
So
21.
What's your perspective? The world has changed in many, many ways. We're here after COVID, and COVID has practically changed, I think, all the parameters, anything that we thought was set. What's your perspective of the woman in construction? It's a male-dominated industry, but there's also other industries that are male-dominated. But women are little by little stepping in. What's been your experience? How do you see the future? How do you see diversity and inclusion? And are women needed or are adding value to our industry?
So absolutely. The world has changed where we don't have these defined, predetermined positions and jobs that only certain people can hold. That just doesn't exist. It didn't exist back then. People believed that it did. But the reality is that if you look at engineering schools nowadays, architecture, everything, the numbers of women that are now studying those types of things and those specialties has tripled, not even doubled, in the past 5, maybe 10 years. If you look at the number of graduates coming out of colleges, again, with specifics in engineering, in construction management, those numbers have changed. One of the things that I think has certainly helped is the federal government providing incentives for female and minority industry heads. In other words, people that own companies that are in construction or in design or architecture that are either female or a minority or a combination of the two. And what it's done is it's a reflection of the cross-section of our society. You don't have just a male, white, dominated business partner that's going to buy your company or going to buy your product. I'm building a building for possibly a female CEO that made that decision, or a board of directors, or the owner of a corporation that's female or a minority. And they have certain inclinations and wants and certain communication style. The one thing that I've found in construction that has certainly improved with women being in the industry, being involved more directly in all aspects of the industry, is communication. Unfortunately, in the old days of the male-dominated industry, every guy thought he had done it right. And there was no need to talk to anybody else. You just did what I said. And now there's more communication, which can only help. It can help minimize litigation. It can help minimize costs. It can minimize back charges, all the negative things that are associated with construction come through communication. But the other thing is experience, taste, needs, wants, all of those things you're getting from a different perspective and a very important perspective of that.
Absolutely. I'm very grateful for the value that women are providing. As long as you don't want to be a guy, you know what I mean. You don't have to become who you're not to be able to be in a leadership position and be able to add value.
I think in construction, just like in parenting, things have changed. In the old days, people thought you yelled at your kids and that made them do what you wanted. And the same thing in construction. There's always the stereotype of the owner of the company yelling at everybody, or the owner of the property yelling at everybody. That's just not necessary anymore. Simple communication in a friendly manner, in a non-adversarial manner, it's so much more fruitful and so much easier to go forward.
Let's talk about another aspect of diversity and inclusion. I hear, we have a younger generation with different values, different way of being. By the way, people that we raised, right? My kids, your kids. We tend to, in the workplace, I respect young people. So I'm not going to, but I hear a lot, young people don't want to work. They just want to have this. And so it's another stereotype that is being formed. I think we're all different. And that this is where really the diversity comes and inclusion. Inclusivity of ideas, diversity of ideas. Because one idea is not necessarily the best idea. So your opinion about, have you worked with young people? What's your opinion? Where can we add value? How do we help them? Where do you see risk? Where do you see improvements?
So stereotypes all come from somewhere, but like you said earlier, they cut out a lot of the important things that make each person different. And the stereotype of what we call now the millennial is that they sleep until noon, they want to play video games all day, work a couple hours, and not do anything. And that could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You repeat it enough to kids and to a younger generation, and they start believing that that's what it is, and everybody else is doing that. The reality is that in the workplace, the primary incentive is living and living well. And although we have a society where fame seems to be a source of income, the reality is that it's work. You still have to put in the work. People don't become famous just because they stood in front of a camera. They had to learn how to produce. They had to learn how to stand. All of the things that go into making someone famous. Some people are just lucky, but that's a very rare group. So one of the things I found with this younger generation and some of my son's friends is that they're going to go to college and they're going for the purpose of partying. That's their purpose. They want to have the college experience, and their parents want to give them that college experience because they had fun when they were, but it's impractical and it's a giant waste of money. The fact is that a kid that goes to a technical school and gets a license in either plumbing, air conditioning trade, any type of trade whatsoever, even just becomes a plumber's assistant and learns in that way from the ground up. Those kids are going to be making money at an earlier age and probably will end up being contractors and entrepreneurs setting up their own businesses long before any of these other kids who are studying history or even studying business, but they're partying through college and not necessarily gaining it. So I think we have a whole generation where we've skipped out on skilled labor, skilled people, and intelligent people who don't need to spend 4-6 years in college, while there are other areas that still require that. But I would say that that's probably the biggest change that I see in this next generation. I think a lot of them will gain practical experience and work in an industry where they can learn and then set up their own business.
So that's a very interesting point, because us parents don't tell our kids, become a plumber. A lot of the times it's also a stereotype. Right. We don't see that well. Probably that can change because of exactly what you're saying. It's true. You end up with a huge debt that sometimes you never get out of it, right? It's a cycle. We have a foundation that you are in the board, the Lunacom Foundation, and the mission is exactly that, to the skilled labor, to promote it and to teach it. Why is it that you think we haven't, I've been in this country for 25 years. And I've been in associations of ABC, AGC, and Industry Advisory Council in FIU. And everyone wants to help and everyone wants to see more trade because the industry has been suffering that precise, the lack of technicians. Why is it that the government, we all don't align and it's in see better results? What's blocking it?
So I think the first thing is, there's obviously a generation gap. You and myself, through experience, found out that there is this gap in skilled labor in trades that are excellent trades, because just because you're a plumber doesn't necessarily mean that 5 years down the road you're going to be turning a wrench or unclogging a toilet. It means that you could be building buildings, 40-story buildings, and being involved in the plumbing work there, or in government contracts, building a high school, building an elementary school, building a military base. All of those things, those all require plumbers, and it doesn't necessarily mean having your hands on the pipes. It means knowing the trade so you know how to sell it. The hard part is, like you said, there's a stereotype, there's a stigma to it. A child in high school, kid in high school, thinks of a plumber as the guy who's got the truck and is going around and just unclogging a toilet. And anyone who's ever dealt with a plumber and anyone in the plumbing industry will tell you that every plumber is much more than that. They have to almost have an engineering type of mind, whether they have a college degree or not, to figure out the flow of water, the excess, the ingress of the water, all of those things that are part of plumbing, turns, pipes, all the issues dealing with, and materials as well. They have to have knowledge of all. And these are things that the only way to get through to this next generation, I believe, is to get into the high schools. We used to have programs that were wood shop, that were craft classes, and that was at every school. Not every kid is at a private prep school that's preparing them for college, and not every kid that is at a private prep school should go to college. There are kids my son's age. My son has two friends specifically, one that loved cars, and he was going to go to a school that is specifically for mechanics, and not necessarily to end up a mechanic, but possibly to get the knowledge to maybe move on and go on to college and become an engineer in automotive. Anything's possible, but you have to learn something practical early on. And I think that's the biggest thing we can teach them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Tell me, what advice would you give a young woman? We talked about kids in general, and I appreciate that feedback. Coming from you as an attorney, it's rare to find an attorney that says, hey, not everyone, the college is not for everyone. And I believe that's truth.
So I can tell you, I learned it from experience. Law school is not for everyone. Out of my law school class, I would say 60% of the people that graduated with me do not practice law in any of the traditional ways of either being in a law firm, in a single practice, or actually litigating or looking at contracts. Most of them went into either businesses or executive programs, or they started their own business unrelated completely to law. They use what they learned there because law school is a trade as well.
Yeah, and it's a process of discipline, and you learn a lot. You learn. But what advice would you give a girl that is in high school to potentially thinking about construction, or maybe listening to this for the first time and they have an idea of what construction is, probably non-related. They don't think this is for them. So
I would say look at the industry as a whole as an opportunity, because it is a wide open field. In the past, it was a male-dominated field, but that no longer exists. And the fact is, you don't necessarily have to be the person that is Rosie Riveter, putting rivets into steel or welding or doing plumbing or electrical. You may be in the other side, on the management side, on the construction management side. And there's a lot of schools out there that teach construction management program, and a lot of colleges and universities that do. I know the University of Florida has an excellent construction management program. Right. And FIU has unbelievable opportunities because they have an entire campus in Doral that is geared towards the industry in many different facets. So I think that a young lady looking at other industries would limit themselves if they didn't look into construction, because it is a wide open opportunity. And the opportunities to use their leadership skills are wide open in the construction industry, unlike many other industries.
Absolutely. Well, in the area of risk management, considering for a company, and now I'm going to gear towards the business owner, whether it's a trade partner or a GC, doesn't matter. In the area of risk management, managing risk, preventing risk, what are the 3 things that you would ask people to, make sure that you are consider this? When I say risk management, I'm even going to insurance. What would be the advice that you would give companies?
So I would work on developing a safety protocol as number one. And when we think of risk management, we think of safety for the most part. So you have to have safety protocols so that everyone knows and is on the same page, whether it's you better have your goggles, your helmet, and your vest, or your harness, whatever it is that type of specialty trade does. There should be a checklist of items that they have and that the foreman, superintendent walks around and makes sure everyone has. I think that's first and foremost. Doing that and having that type of checklist will actually lower your insurance if you work with an agent that sees it firsthand and says, oh, these guys are lower risk. It may help you. The other thing, obviously, and we're talking about workers' comp type of risk management, but also, injury and damage to other trades. You have situations where a drywall contractor drills through and misses and hits a pipe. And now you've got a leak spurring, or you don't know, and the leak comes down the road. And all of those issues go back to checklists, to not hurrying, to not flying through a project, and more importantly, to communication. Having everybody know that the most important thing is doing your job right. In football, baseball, any sport that you play, what a coach does and their primary job is to remind you that you need to be focused. Whether there's 25 distractions or not, I'm here to tell you to be focused. And they spend hours and hours in practice telling the kids and teaching them how to remain focused. The same thing happens in the construction industry. Whether you are a tile guy, whether you are doing roofing work, whether you're a supplier, everything should come down to focus. What is your job and what do you need to do your job best and most efficient? And at the end of the day, you do that and you will show up and you will exceed expectations, because everyone does have expectations that things are going to go wrong and things will go wrong. It's just minimizing those risks. So those are 2 of the things. And then the third thing is obviously to work with your insurance company to make sure that the coverages you have for the type of work you're doing are proper, that you're not exceeding, that you're not spending way too much money. And the same thing happens with bonds. When you're working with a bond agent, you want to make sure that the bonds are all proper. You want to make sure that you're not overpaying.
Overpaying or not protected.
You don't want to be left exposed. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's important, right?
And one last thing, and I know we were saying 3 things, but the 4th thing I would say is, and again, it comes back to a lawyer because I see it from my perspective and my experience, is setting yourselves up. Your construction company needs to be separate from your personal income, from your investments. And that's very important because construction, you get large amounts of cash, and there's times where the cash flow is excellent. Everybody makes a lot of money. You're buying things, you're investing in areas, and you want to make sure that those things stay separate for the times where the cash flow is not so good, but for the times where there is some adversity, be it litigation or any other thing that could come along. You want to make sure you keep all aspects of your life separate, whether it's your profession, your personal investments, and your toys or your enjoyment.
Absolutely. Tell me about a contractor working for a developer, the GC-developer relationship, or vice versa, which is a different world than the one we have discussed. What's your experience? What word of advice would you give someone that is engaging with a developer, other than meeting with your attorney to look at the contract? So
I think the most important thing is to understand what the developer wants, what his needs wants, but more importantly, what his goals are. He's got a number, because it all boils down to numbers. And he has a number that he has in mind for a project with a little bit of wiggle room for things that happen. But that number should always be the end goal. Whether you have to put it on a chalkboard or on a calendar on your desk, somewhere that you get reminded, that's the number we need to achieve in order to continue with this development. Developers, for the most part, end up using a contractor on multiple projects if it's successful. That's one of the areas that you do see some continuity and some loyalty. But the reality is that it's all about success. You are successful in your part as the contractor. They are successful in their part. They can use you again in those projects. But ultimately, if you're on the contractor side, the one thing you need to know is how many projects is this developer working on? How much actual funding does he have? Is he bonded? Bonds are a two-way street. You want to make sure that if you're working with a private developer, that he has the financial wherewithal to complete the project.
That's a very good point. I didn't know you could bond a developer.
Of course.
I thought it was a letter of credit.
Well, exactly. And you're right. That's a more technical thing. I was saying it generally. But you want to make sure that there are guarantees that you're going to be paid, not just because, like in all contracts, you want to have reciprocation where both sides have an even ground. So you want to make sure that you can complete the job. One of the things that many contracts I see nowadays, they want to see your finances. They want to make sure that you can complete their project. So similar, you should make sure that they're able to pay you for your completion.
And that there's a letter of credit, money set aside to pay this project and they can't touch it, which is what the government does. The government sets aside an amount of money for a project and they cannot use it in any way, shape, or form. So going a little bit into the future, I love technology. I love innovation. And we're living in times where things are changing so fast and we're building technology on top of technology. I think our industry is antiquated. Hasn't evolved much in time. Even though we've added technology here and there, there's things that are happening. You see technology starting to appear, like 3D printing. It's kind of still foreign. There's a lot that has to happen for it to be utilized more. What can we do? And this goes along with humanizing construction. I'm passionate about that topic. How do we make our industry human? How do we less transaction, more? It's a people's business in reality, but we don't take the people side of it is not as prevalent. We don't keep it top of mind when we're doing transaction. And this communication topic, that is coming up in our conversation, it's you're communicating with a human, not an AI, or contract that is here and it's a human. We can't do anything without people. How do we make more progress in terms of innovation, use innovation in some areas, and how do we make our industry more human? How do we evolve?
So it's funny that you should put humanizing together with technology, but they are able to work hand in hand, and a human can take advantage of technology in great ways. So an example is 4 persons, superintendents, whoever's on the job that is the person that is your project point person on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. And I think you and I have spoken about this in the past personally. One of the things that I see is a simple text message. Hey, how did the project go today? Any issues? Anything we should look forward to tomorrow? Anything we need to be aware of? 3 questions like that sent to the person on the job that is the point person. Those 3 questions will give them 2 things. One is, rather than going home and telling their wife, oh, my day was awful, I had this happen at work, I had this happen, they're going to have already told you all of those things. That helps you document and anticipate problems, whether it's supply chain issues or it's employee and labor issues that you can foresee the next day because you just received a text. And I mean, we're talking about a 2-minute text that can be a form every single day. And the guy responds back, your 4-person, the 4 superintendent, whoever it is that's there on the job, your project manager, dictates into their phone 3 answers. Listen, today was a great day. There were no issues. Everything's going fine. Tomorrow they're going to deliver roofing materials. We anticipate they'll be there by 10. Everybody showed up on time to work today. Great. That's the ideal day. The reality of the normal day, so-and-so showed up late. We got to watch him. That's the 3rd time he's done this to me, or she's done that to me, or such and such trucking company, they're not delivering the goods on time. They've got delays. We need to talk to her or him about that to get them going. Those are the normal things. Or even worse, hey, the owner's looking for this giant change. They don't like the materials that we brought on the project.
Or they believe it's not a change, it's in the contract and we don't agree and they want it for free and the subcontractor says that it's not, and that kind of stuff.
Those are exactly the type of things that in 3 questions every afternoon at 5 o'clock, your foreperson, your superintendent, your property manager, project manager, anybody that's on the job that you feel should be telling you, because what you want is eyes and ears on every aspect of the job, not to micromanage, but to assist. So that you don't have to micromanage. That person can then manage.
And that's a way of people giving an opportunity for people to vent, which is sometimes is huge, even though the problem is not solved. One of the issues in our industry is that maybe because it's male dominated, men don't like to talk about the problems, or they don't like to disclose their emotions. And there's suicide in our industry, second highest rate is suicide. So it comes from disconnection from self, disconnection from people, disconnection from wealth. You see things going wrong and you immediately project the worst. So you see the reality worse than what it really is. And when you have a channel to express what's going on, and I like your formula every day, whether it's good or bad, tell the good and tell what you think is bad, because that way you're not expected only to talk about what's bad, but you are training your mind and yourself to celebrate the success, what's going well, because you have to celebrate your wins.
And as a business owner or a contractor that hires these people, and as the person receiving, whoever the person is that will be receiving these texts or these messages, emails are great too, because everybody has email on their phone now. And again, emails are much easier to download and to print and to keep, where the text is a little bit more difficult. But it's a great form of record keeping. Anything you can do, whether it's those daily reports or weekly reports, they're excellent for down the road, any issues that come up. But the issue that you have to look is the other side of the coin. So this person is reporting to you all these negative things. The human aspect is you receive 10 consecutive days of nothing but negative. You as the business owner, as the contractor, as the boss, need to respond, okay, I appreciate all those things and you've given me some great input. Anything positive going on, any good things going on, you have to be the person that controls that, because you also don't want to get in your mind the stereotype of, oh, that guy's just negative on everything. Oh, he never has anything positive.
I absolutely agree.
So your job is to manage, just like a football coach is a game manager that controls how everybody feels on there, or a basketball coach calls a timeout because he doesn't think things are going right. You need to do the same thing and say, all right, timeout. I've had 5 days of consecutive. There has to be something positive going on. And we've talked about things to incentivize, to humanize your relationship as the owner with the employees. And it's simple things. It's, coming by one day with, lunch for everybody. Whether it's once a month or just once on a project, humanize it. Take part in it. And I think every business owner has to, at some point, put a face with a name. Unfortunately, in our modern day of electronics, you can hire somebody remotely, never actually see their face other than on Zoom, and you deal with them over a phone line. There is still nothing as important as the human interaction. Knowing how tall that person is, if you're looking into their eyes or not, knowing something about that person's family, all of those things help the interpersonal and creates loyalty between the business owner, the business owner's employees, and everybody in between. And one of the great things I've seen on projects that are from family-owned businesses is the project owner sees that this is a giant family that's building. This contractor, the superintendent, is friends with this guy, and they all have conversations and they all get along. There's nothing better for an owner, because it helps on both sides. They're not going to be as quick to say, oh, we can divide this guy. We can steal this foreman from him, or we can get him to do something for us. They're not going to even try that.
Or, I think it also influences their state.
Right.
It also influences them. I agree. There's the world that we're living in, the Zoom world, you can still connect. You just have to have that intention. If that's what you have, it's a matter of asking questions and trying to really see what's going on, in the person's life. And a lot of times it's just listening, asking questions and listening. Sometimes we don't give ourselves the opportunity to do that.
And we're talking about minute, minutes of time that really it wouldn't take you but 5 minutes to draft up that email or send that text. And similarly, one of the things that in the old days, people picked up the phone and called each other. Emails, unfortunately, are very cold. And an email that I send to you is, hey, I killed today, where you're saying I did a great job today, can be read as, I killed today. It looks like you murdered somebody. Emails can be misconstrued. You don't want that. You want them to know. So your email should be almost a follow-up to a phone conversation, or the opposite. After the email, I think it's better because you got it in writing, and now you can get more details and a little bit of humanity to it.
Absolutely. I am a firm believer. If you're going to send something that is going to be, you're not saying Merry Christmas to someone, and it's something that is going to create maybe not discomfort, but it's a challenge for the person. Call and say, hey, whether it's an architect, sometimes we're very prompt to throw the architect under the bus, and we're all a team. Nobody can be successful without just the GC or without the architect or without the owner. But calling and saying, hey, listen, I had this challenge. I see this in the structural drawings. I see this, but in the architectural drawings, I see this. I don't know how you see it. I want to send you a picture. And the contract tells me that when I have a doubt, I have to ask a question. It's called an RFI. I'm sending this to you. It's not I need your help. And I'm here, let's do it together. I can give you my opinion, but I'm not an architect. As a GC, we're not here to design. I'm sending this to you. And just a simple information, just like it's required. It's important to talk. I would say before rather than later, because sometimes people get it and they think that you're getting after them.
So the problem with doing it before, having the phone call before, is in the phone call, you're going to give more details than you put in the writing. And you have a tendency to say, well, that person already knows that, so I don't need to put this in writing. Where if you put it in writing, you're giving as much information as you can at that moment. And then you follow it up with a phone call where you can plug in the details that maybe and you can take notes on. But there's two different styles, and it also depends on the situation.
The point here is that you have to document.
Absolutely.
No questions, and communicate. So for me, I don't have a problem on saying, hey, this is going your way, but it's going. Like not that it's not going. We're gonna solve it, and I still have even if there's a resolution over the phone, you can document that. Hey, based on our conversation, you're asking me to knock down this wall. You got to document.
And that's, again, people think, so there's negative stigmas attached to, well, I guess a stigma is negative, but there's a negative connotation attached to somebody putting in writing or telling you, well, I need it in writing. And that needs to go away. That's as simple as telling your foreperson, look, it's just what we do. It's our procedure. It's a checklist. It's a procedure. It's not a negative thing.
It's in the contract, Edgar.
Right. But I'm saying just in regular life. So I'll give you a great example. A claim of lien in a private project. I heard a judge the other day, we were in a case, and my opposing counsel came in and gave an entire speech about all the things that a claim of lien does and the damage and the injury that it causes to the owner. And he went through a litany of things. And he said, can you imagine? That's right off the bat, just with a piece of paper recorded. And the judge said, this is very serious business, Mr. Belaval, to me. And he says, I mean, you are tying up this person's property. I said, hold on a second, Judge. A claim of lien is an instrument created by the Florida legislature. It was created for one reason and one reason only, to make sure that contractors, laborers, suppliers get paid. Because prior to this, owners resold the property, refinanced the property, and left the contractor out in the cold. So it's a matter of protection. Just like a seatbelt in your car is regulated and the government did it, they didn't do it so they could harness you to the vehicle. They did it so they could protect you in case of an accident. And that's exactly what a claim of lien is. It's an instrument. And the same thing with an email in writing or a change order in writing or a pay application. But I advise all of my clients that the first thing they need to do when they look at a contract is make sure that there is not a no lien provision. Because anyone that is telling you, no, you can't lien the project, whether you're a subcontractor, a supplier, if they're telling you can't lien the project or you can't make a claim on the bond,
Wrong.
that should be, emergency ambulance-like signals coming at you as to, I have no business doing this. There's no way. This is a bad contract. Because a lien, again, the Florida legislature, elected representatives who aren't even in the construction industry, developed the claim of lien to protect you and I. They're protecting you, so you, as an innocent contractor who did the work and didn't get paid, has a claim for an X amount of dollars unpaid.
So you had a judge. You were telling a story. You had a judge that questioned you about a lien.
Well, he attacked me or my client by saying, your client has put this claim of lien. This is very serious business. You're damaging and injuring their property. I said, Judge, this is real simple. This is the difference between walking out on a tab at a bar or a restaurant or making sure you have their driver's license before they leave so they're forced to come back. That's what a claim of lien is. A claim of lien is just an instrument that protects you because you want to make sure that owner paid you. If he didn't pay you and he has proper defenses, then he'll have no problem going out and getting a bond. He'll have no problem defending himself in a case or even sitting down and having a mediation with you. But if that owner says, there is no way that you could lien this property, there is no way that I'm going to accept this lien, you've damaged me or you've injured me, and she tells you, you've ruined my property with this, I can't refinance it, fine, pay me the money I'm owed. This is only about monies owed. That's not to say that there aren't fraudulent liens out there where they are so greatly exaggerated. However, the rare instance where it is a fraudulent lien, I tell you, is 1 in a billion. They're really not that much. At some point, it's a communication breakdown. Even where the lien appears fraudulent, if you sit and talk to the other side, they have a different perspective and a different reason for that lien amount. And you may reach an accord or an agreement at some point because both sides will have spoken.
Edgar, how do you get so good in communication? And because obviously it has to do with you not getting emotional also. So how do you get that good at it? Because I'm pretty impressed.
I would say I'm the exact opposite of that. I am extremely emotional. I do accelerate my cadence when I speak about something I'm passionate about. My voice goes up. I get louder. And what I've done in the past is, and most recently, is actually when it's before a juror or even a judge that I haven't been before, I will explain to them, hey, I'm apologizing to you in advance if you hear me raise my voice or if I start talking too fast. It's because I'm passionate about that subject. So that when I reach a certain point advocating for my client, you may hear me raise my voice. I'm not raising my voice intentionally as an actor to try and garner your attention or get you to focus. I'm doing it because I'm passionate, because I believe. And I do that because as an attorney, I'm very different than other attorneys. Like I said, I like to go to the offices of my client. I like to know my client. I like to know them to the level that I can actually believe them when they tell me something without having to see documentation to prove it. And that's very rare because a lawyer, unfortunately, is handcuffed by billable hours. And these things aren't billable, but they're just as important as every billable hour I spend drafting a motion or in court arguing. And I think sometimes it's way more important than any of those things. Certainly than travel time between hearings or than preparation time before hearing. Knowing your client that well that you can say, look, they always do. In fact, I can tell you 6 projects where they've done the exact same thing. When you can say something like that, you know your client well enough. You're not even advocating. You're a family member. You're a partner. And that's the kind of relationship. So yes, I think there is emotion involved in it. I think that in speaking and in dragging on and belaboring a point, it's because a person is passionate about it and has knowledge.
And knowledge. So who's your ideal client, or who are you not a fit for?
So it all depends because I have clients. I have quite a few clients. And even in the past, I was in-house counsel for a developer. And in these various instances, some of these guys came along. Some of the clients that have hired me, they hired me because I either angered them, frustrated them, beat them, or I may have even lost on a case, but they liked my style, or they don't want to deal with me as an adversarial. They'd rather me on their side. I mean, I tell you that jokingly, but it's true. There are people that have said, man, you were such a jerk. I just never want to deal with you again. So I'd rather have you on my side. Right. But by the same token, most of them hire me because I get to know them and I delve into the case. And it's not just a checklist or a quick settlement. Some attorneys, they'll tell you, oh, I'll take this on a contingency. They want to settle that thing as quick as possible because that's their cash flow. They're not doing it on a billable hour rate. And so they're settling your case for less than its value. And you don't want to deal with it. You want somebody that you know well enough and that you becomes like a family member or a partner.
Before we end our conversation, what last messages can you give to our listeners? And I'm going to commit you, we're going to have a follow-up because there's way too much to talk about.
So I think that the most important message that anyone should take from this podcast is the importance of communication and documentation in every aspect of construction, whether it's a change, whether it's a schedule, whether it's who's going to be where, whether it's when do we start, or any issues that have come up. Communication is the most important thing. You and your employees and your employer and your subs and everybody around you should be in constant communication. I don't know that there are areas where you can communicate too much in construction. I mean, if you're just sitting there blabbing and wasting somebody's time on a construction project and they can't get to putting up the drywall, that's a different story. But if they're telling you, hey, listen, I've got this issue with the drywall because the electrical guys haven't finished, you as the prime contractor can go to the electrical guy and say, hey, listen, you need to speed up. And you don't have to do it in a format where you're threatening them or calling for liquidated damages or termination. So communication and documentation.
Sometimes it's just asking for a favor.
Correct.
People I want to help.
And everyone wants to see a project succeed. And I remind every subcontractor, every contractor, every laborer, architect, engineer, or even the guy who's the estimator. One day, be it 6 months from now or a year from now or 20 years from now, you're going to drive by that building, that property, that location, and you're going to either look at it with pride or disgust. Don't you want to look at it with pride and tell your kids or your wife or your husband or your parents, hey, I built that. I did this and that on that project. One of the few areas of business where you can point to projects completed with a tremendous sense of pride. Because the reality is in business and corporations and buying and selling, and even in law, these things, it's not something practical you can point to. Looking at a building and a completed structure, there is nothing better.
And all the pieces all the things that have to be done right in order to see that end product. It's amazing, the level of leadership, communication. There's a lot that goes into play to see a successful building. I love, and I'm going to implement it, your idea of allowing people, which we have started, but I think we have to go to another level. I'm going to talk to Yvette. It's allowing people to bring this stuff to you. The thing that I can
encouraging
them, but have the
make
channel,
it a good thing.
Make it a system. Like making it a system, like a part of your culture. Habitual thing. They can bring stuff positive every day, right? Communicate. It's got to be a system. The question is, what can screw that up? And it could also be the receiver. Like you said, it could be the business owner that can only handle a number of negative news, right? And when I say, and with those news touch their emotions, and it could be a challenge. This is why it's so important for the business owner and any person in leadership, anybody, to grow. Because we tend to avoid these things and we rather avoid the communication because, we want to sleep well. And we don't have an avenue on how to deal with stress and how to deal with this type of negative news. We tend to project the worst onto any news that we have and create a story around it. We make it worse in our heads. So if the person is not growing and learning and finding ways to improve their leadership skills, it could be detrimental. That system might not be successful.
But that means that they're in the wrong business. Because the fact is, as a contractor, as anyone involved in construction, the higher up you get, the more things you have to juggle. And There was a show many years ago called Ed Sullivan in the 1950s, way before your time, definitely, but before my time. And that show, there was a guy who specialized in plates. And he would put these sticks out in plates. And the more exciting it got, it was as he had more plates going and trying to keep all these plates spinning at once. And he'd keep putting out plates. And you're thinking at some point, these plates are all going to come crashing down. That's exactly what the construction industry is. The higher up you are in construction, from the developer and owner down, you have all these plates that are spinning. And you have to know that you're not the only one spinning plates. As the prime contractor, you're not the only one spinning plates because your subcontractor has his issues. And your engineer, she has her issues. And your architect, she has these other issues. So all of that, everybody's spinning plates. It's just a matter of how many plates you can spin and handle. And the reality is that there are ways to deal with this. And there are ways to de-stress so that you can sleep at night. But nobody has ever lost sleep because they know too much or they have too much information. Because the fact is that usually quells you and helps you go to sleep knowing, all right, then tomorrow we'll take care of this.
Right. At the end of the day, to solve, first of all, something that triggers you and what we call a problem, it's really an opportunity to learn. Because it is only a problem when you don't know how to solve it. Anything that comes our way, wherever, depending on where we are in life, right, our growth, if we know how to solve it, we don't call it a problem.
So if you're a person that has a lot of things on your mind, I give you an example. My father was an airline pilot. He worked for an airline. He didn't have to do any checklists, anything, until he actually sat down in the airplane. All his preparation, his education was already taken care of. He arrived on the airplane, checked for fuel, checked for his next weather, all those things, next location. Those things he did once he got in the cockpit. My father was the craziest, lightest sleeper on earth. And my mother one day said, Gary, what is it? And he said, well, I just have to do. Tomorrow I've got to go get a car line. Tomorrow I have to do this. Nothing related to work. All personal things. So my mother had him create a system. If something's put it down. Something's bothering you, or you have something to do tomorrow, make an actual to-do list for tomorrow. Because if it's 2 a.m. and you're rolling around, continuing to roll around isn't going to resolve that, and it's not going to help you sleep better. So wake up, go turn on the light, and make a list. Tomorrow, I need to do this. Even if it's one thing. Once you've done that, put that one item on the list, you will relax and you will sleep better.
Once you get it out of your head, put it in piece of paper.
So again, not putting out a theme there, but documenting and communication. Those are the things that are most important, not just in law, not just in construction.
And revealing the truth will set you free, right? That's written somewhere, and it really does.
Everybody says it when, they've been holding on to a lie or a secret or something. Once they finally let that go, it's like a weight was taken off their shoulders.
Amen. Listen, I love talking to you. I mean, we're personal friends, and I love your passion into the industry and your passion to help people. We have a lot of work ahead of us. But if somebody wants to talk to you, they have a concern, and how do they get a hold of you?
So my website is pretty easy. It's floridaconstruction.law. So as opposed to .com, it's .law. So the word Florida Construction, all in one, .law. My email address is easy as well. It's the word attorney, ATTORNEY, with the letters FLA as in Florida. So attorney, FLA, @gmail.com. Or you can reach me by phone, 305-389-2882. That is my cell phone. The reason I give out my cell phone is because I expect clients, future clients, past clients, or just anybody to be able to reach me at any time, whether it's by text, telephone call, or any other method.
Thank you so much, Edgar.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this conversation, and again, I'm going to say it again. We're doing this again as a follow-up, and we're going to create something fun for people to grow together.
I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Thriving in Construction, the podcast with Patricia Bonilla. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to help support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you have any suggestions or any related topics you would like us to tackle in our future episodes, Feel free to reach Patricia by sending her a message through the website anchor.fm/thrivinginconstruction or find her on LinkedIn. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week here in Thriving in Construction, the podcast.